some of the guests I've had, Carla, over the years are people I've known very well and for a long time, and some are new friends, like our friendship is developing. I first met you through the newspaper. September 19th, was it?
Yes.
Of last year, the New York Times, did anyone see it? The New York Times had a feature story on you, and here was the title. The title was, Morgan executive fits a choir robe beneath her pinstripes. What was that about?
Yes. Well, the article, well, first of all, let me say good morning.
Good morning.
And God is good all the time, and all the time God is good. I'll tell you, the article was really talking about what I do outside of my everyday Morgan Stanley job, and that is I sing. I'm also a gospel singer. I recorded 3 CDs, and I'm about to do my 4th concert at Carnegie Hall on November 19th this year. And just to tell you a quick story about that, and Faith.
Oops, sorry. What do we need to do? I'm getting side waving.
It wasn't on.
There we
you know
go.
what? But
I think they heard you anyway.
I was about to say, let me just ask you, can you hear me? Okay, let me,
We thought the mic was on.
Because I got a big mouth.
Carl, I forgot to tell you, it's a very bashful, very shy crowd.
Okay. And the concerts started because I was sitting on a boat with my pastor in the summer of 2005.
Were you walking on water?
No, I wasn't walking on water. But I believe that I can do that. He says I can do that. And I said, I had already been involved in raising money for the school up in Harlem and the school in Jacksonville, Florida, Bishop Kenny High School, and through the CDs.
Now, you're being a little modest. You've actually been a very faithful financial supporter of these 2 schools.
Yes, absolutely. And I recorded the first CD in 1999, which is also an interesting story, and the second CD in 2005. And all of the proceeds from the sale of the CDs were split equally between the 2 schools in Harlem and in Jacksonville, Florida. So we're sitting on the boat, and I said, it might be pretty cool to do a Carnegie Hall concert. And he said, yeah, that might be pretty cool. And I said, then I could raise money and give even more money to the schools. He said, yeah, that might be pretty cool. So Monday, I walk into Carnegie Hall, and I'll never forget her name, Glenda Weisberger. I walked in, I asked where the booking office was, and I walked in to Glenda Weisberger, and I said, hi, I'd like to do a concert at Carnegie Hall. And she said, and who are you? I said, I'm Carla Harris. And she's looking at me like,
Child of God.
Right, so, we start talking, and of course she's telling me, it's very expensive, you got to blah, and I'm like, And then so I let her do her spiel, and I said, so where's the paperwork? And so she's like, and who are you again? And I had no concept that I couldn't do it.
Right.
I now have big respect for producers. But anyway, so that's the, because now I didn't really have any idea of what was involved. I mean, literally, on faith, and I just figured, we could figure it out. And around, and that was July, August, and around September, I started to panic. The human part of me came in. I was like, suppose nobody buys any tickets, because who am I? And the other side of my brain said, oh no, you're Carla Harris, right? So I said, okay, I know what I can do. Because I had been in capital markets, and I am a syndicator by nature, I said, you know what? I'll get 25 of my friends to write a check for $1,000. I'll get 25 of my friends to write a check for $500. That's $37,500. I'll put a little more with it. So at a minimum, they'll get $40,000, $20,000 to each school. So if nobody buys a ticket,
there we go.
And we raised $77,500 that first year.
That's terrific.
What I learned was don't limit people in their giving. So the next year, I did the typical New York City thing where you give people different tiers. Yeah. And the next year, we raised $275,000. And the third year, $300,000, and I'm pushing for $500 this year. So that was he really wanted to get at, what else besides the banking piece, and why the gospel, why the faith. And that was actually, David, the third article that was written on me that really connected the dots between my faith and my singing and who I am as a banker. Because the story I love to tell when I said, make sure you have balance in your life and stay true to who you are. I had been a banker for 12 years. And as a banker, you live and breathe to get your name, your story, your deal, your quote, either in the Wall Street Journal or in the New York Times business section, particularly the Sunday Times, right? And I had been a banker for 12 years and had never had any of that recognition. And there it was on September 29th, 2000, Manager Sings of a Manger. where they had written in the Sunday New York Times business section the fact that I had released my first CD, Carla's First Christmas. And the story that I tell all the time, particularly to younger professionals, is, here I was doing something that was about his birthday to help other people because all the proceeds were going to go out. And that's when I got business recognition. Interesting, huh? And it's funny how that works. February 2007,
Right.
after my second Carnegie Hall concert, and all of them have been sold out, praise God.
Wow.
And the writer wrote half-page investment banker credo, good business, good music, good works, where again, they wrote about what I was doing with the gospel music and how I was using that to help kids. And I was on my way to see a new client for the first time that day. I hadn't even seen the journal. And I got down there and he said, oh, come on, you set this up for our first meeting, right? But it was interesting because he was a Christian and he had a lot of faith. And we spent more than half the meeting talking about that, which gave me a whole different level of exposure and opportunity to connect with this person in a way that I don't think I would have been able to connect if just Carla, the banker, was in the room.
Well, isn't it something how I think we're so taught and disciplined to compartmentalize our life, that people don't want to hear the God stuff, so just leave that at home, it's fine, but it's your private life. So you graduate from Harvard, little stint at Booz Allen, I think, and then Harvard B School, and then you go into the street. Were you then as open as you are now about your faith, or was it sort of off in the corner like
No.
most of us do?
It's never been off in the corner, and anybody that knows me will tell you that. And because it's just a part. It's just a part of who I am, and I get the question all the time. Wall Street. Christian. That doesn't work. And I tell people, and I look them in the eye, and I said, it is not mutually exclusive. Yeah. You do not have to check your faith or your person at the door in order to be successful in this business. Now, what I do think has been effective is I've never tried to push it down anybody else's throat. And I think that's where people run into trouble. Right. But if you let who you are exist, it should be attractive to people. They should say, I want some of that. And the way that I would integrate it at work, and again, unconsciously, I can look back now and say it to you and articulate it, but it was certainly unconscious at the time. If a deal wasn't going well, I would say to my colleagues, okay, we've done everything we can on this. There's a mass at St. Patrick's at 12 o'clock. I'm going to get on my knees. That's what I'm doing for lunch. And it got to be a routine when deals weren't going well. I'd say, I'm going to get on my knees and pray about this one. And inevitably, the deal would get priced at 4 o'clock, right? And then I would joke with them and say, you know why that happened, right? And so they would then say to me when they had a deal not going well, Carla, where are you going to lunch? Can you go?
Aren't you hungry yet?
Right. And you'd be surprised at also because of my faith and the fact that I just am who I am, people would often pull me aside in the conference rooms and say, this is going wrong with our baby, or my mother just got diagnosed with so-and-so, and I know you have a hotline up there, so, can you say a prayer? Yeah. And it was amazing who did that. Yeah. And it was the most unlikely folks at the end of the day, and I was very happy that they felt comfortable enough that they could approach me and say, can you say a prayer for me?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Can you, and as that began to happen, did you ever get any pushback from people saying, hey, Carla, I know this is important to you, but you got to tone it down a bit?
No, not one time on my 25 years on the street, not once. And I said, again, I think it's the way I communicated, when I communicated, and how I communicated. I do not wear holy roller on my sleeve, but very clearly who I am. Yeah.
I think there is something about, there's a yearning in the marketplace. Everyone's slick, everyone's got spin, everyone's, we're all marketing experts. And I think there's a yearning just for authenticity. Yeah. That if I'm going to do a deal with someone, I want to look them in the eye and know I can trust this guy or gal. And part of that is just being who you are. Agreed. So if you or I shut down part of who we are, then they miss that. And so maybe faith isn't someone's thing, or maybe someone's another religion and they're a little concerned, but if they say, well, this is who she is, that resonates.
Yes.
That resonates.
Yes, I could not agree with you more. It's funny, I speak at a lot of conferences and I attend a lot of conferences, and interestingly enough, in the last 6 months, I've heard the authenticity word come up more and more and more.
Yeah.
It really is gaining momentum, and people are starting to get it now. I just went to the Fortune Magazine Most Powerful Women in Business Conference, and it was interesting how it came up there, particularly in terms of managing crisis. There was a section that talked about leaders and how they manage crisis and how they message it. And the number one thing that kept coming up over and over is be authentic. Own it. Say that you're sorry about it, try to fix it, but bring who you really are to the table.
Which is the good, bad, and the ugly, because none of us are perfect, right?
That's exactly right. And every human can connect to that because we all make mistakes. It's really about how you manage those mistakes and how you communicate it, and whether or not you're prepared to own it. And there was a time, that if you made a big mistake, especially as a leader, the appropriate response was, right? It's over there, but it's not here, right? But I think now people get it. That if it happened under your watch, you either own it or you own responsibility for it.
Exactly. Who's the former CEO of Medtronics, Bill?
George.
Thank you, Bill George. He wrote a book called Authentic Leadership, and it's a terrific book. It's short, and I'm buried in the middle of it on page. He's now up at Harvard B School and professor of X, and just a terrific guy. He on page 67, buried in the middle of it, he talks about that he was in the Twin Cities part of a men's Bible study for some 15 or 20 years. Ken Melrose, who's been a guest here and several others, and he said, that's what always kept me anchored. What do you do to keep yourself anchored? All you're on a who's who of every list. You're one of the top female executives, top black female executives, philanthropists. You win every award that exists, and some I didn't even know about. You have honorary doctorates. But so, how do you keep that from going up here to your head and getting a little puffed? Do you have some grounding practices or disciplines?
Well, first of all, I pray every day.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
and I pray all day, every day. I don't drink my own Kool-Aid. I don't drink my own Kool-Aid. I don't think that I am better than anybody else walking around here. And, I said at T.D. Jakes' church a few months ago, I'm really no different than that woman I might have passed on the corner that you think is homeless, et cetera, et cetera. We just made two different choices. We might have had different access, and we made different choices. But at the end of the day, we're both women, and I don't ever forget that. And my mother used to teach me all the time when I was little. All right, be careful. The same people you meet on the way up, will be the same people you see on the way down there. So I never ever lose that. I am really, really grateful for everything that I've been able to accomplish. And I'm very clear that I was only able to accomplish it through His grace, His mercy, and His help. So I never forget that.
Yeah, no, so, I was, about 3 or 4 years ago, I was giving a talk before a large Methodist church, Lutheran church, not as big as T.D. Jakes' church, to be sure. It was a Saturday retreat, sort of a men's retreat on faith and work. It's about 700 guys on a Saturday there. And I was just feeling my oats and feeling a little bit bigger than I should have been feeling. And I was all mic'd up and ready to go, and decided, well, I better go to the men's room real quickly before I go off. You can see where this is going. The mic was on when I'm so I come out, and I've now and then gotten some nice applause after a talk, but I've never gotten a standing ovation before a talk. and exactly, so my ego got right back down where it belongs, and between that and my good wife keeping me in check. But no, when you pray, this may be too personal, but do you have sort of with your being Catholic, are there sort of set prayers you have? Or are you sort of a free spirit, or do you turn to a certain texts? Just be curious. We all pray differently.
I do all three. Obviously, I was brought up. I am a cradle Catholic from 3 months old, and so obviously I know the Rosary. My mother was a great devotee to the Blessed Mother, so I know the Rosary and I use the Rosary. But I've also expanded my faith markedly, particularly over my adult life. And so there are certain scriptures that I go to. You'll see in the last chapter of my book, there are certain scriptures that I use as my daily tools. There are certain things that I'll go to depending on what the challenge might be to remind me, of whose I am and the strength that I have and the power that is within me because of that. And I'll also just talk to Him. You and I were having a quick conversation yesterday, and I was telling you that it was over my adult life where I really felt like I got the personal relationship with him. Growing up Catholic, because there are, it's very, very formal. There are confines in the way that you do things and the way that you pray, and that's how you grow up. But I don't think it's until you start to get real personal challenges where, as they say, late in the midnight hour, when you're having that personal conversation and you start to be able to hear him for yourself. And that's where the personal relationship comes in. So sometimes it's a conversation the same way you and I are having. As I said to someone today as I was driving up here, Gina, the GPS didn't work. It would not get 710 Steamboat Road.
Gina's
her name is Gina. And
is she Catholic too?
No, Gina's universal. Which means Catholic, by the way. But anyway,
you know what GPS stands for, right?
No.
God's positioning system.
Yeah, amen on that. But I couldn't get the address in here. And, finally I said, you know what? They said exit 3. We'll get it. And I said, Lord, I need to get there by 6:45. So you make this happen. And, sure enough, it worked. I was here by 6:45.
Have you, we chatted a little bit about this yesterday, but I'd be interested, Wall Street, sometimes it could be a club. The good old boys get together, and of course it's changed in so many ways. But have you ever had experiences, as a woman or as a black woman, that you felt you're bumping into boundaries that, something's not right, something's going on here that doesn't have anything to do with my aptitude or my abilities? Do you ever have any situations like that? And when you do, how do you, we all respond differently when we hit those barriers or boundaries. Have you ever had that? And
I'll tell you, and again, I can look you in the eye and tell you that after 25 years, I've never felt like I bumped up against something that I couldn't get through because of who I was.
Right.
I certainly have had situations where I could tell people were making an assumption about who I was because of the package. And I'll never forget my very first transaction. I was in M&A when I started. And I was young. I was 23, going on 24 when I first started in the business. So, one could argue that I had 3 strikes. I was young, I was a woman, and I was black.
Guess what?
Boy, here we go, right? So,
and you walk into the conference room.
But again, I trusted him, and I got sent out for my first deal. And remember, the situation is, it was a sell side transaction. So at the end of the day, they weren't going to have a job. And so there was already probably, some ill feelings despite whoever I would have been walking in the door as a person to sell that asset or try to help sell that asset. And, everybody was sort of late 50s to mid 60s, I would say, on the management team. Right. And I could tell by the way the guy looked at me and that, he thought, oh my gosh, I didn't get the A team, I didn't get the B team. They sent me the C team. and I had a little red pocket Bible that I had in my blazer pocket, and I put my hand on that Bible and I said, Lord, I'm gonna open my mouth and you speak. Because the human part of me was like, and it went really well, and that was the deal that really taught me not to pick up other people's baggage. If someone has a perception,
what do you mean by that?
If somebody has a perception of you based on their own experiences, and we do, we create no matter who we are. That's their baggage. Don't you pick up their baggage and start carrying it, because baggage is heavy and it will create a competitive disadvantage for you.
Interesting.
So be your best self. And I started looking at it, I'm negatively motivated. So when you tell me I can't do something, I'm all over it, right? And so I started looking at any situation like that as a challenge. So if I thought somebody had that baggage, I would smile and say, by the end of this, I'm going to put you right here. And as Donna Ross used to say, I'm gonna make you love me. Right? And there was a guy there who was particularly mean to me, and his wife happened to be pregnant at the time. And so every time I got out there for a date room or something like that, the guy was always mean, and I would say, okay, Carla, don't run away, go towards him, go towards him. So I would always make sure that I got as close as possible, to him. And I would tell him, she's gonna have that baby. She's gonna have that baby on my birthday. My birthday is October 28th. And I said, she's gonna have that baby on my birthday. And the guy would just, but I kept getting closer and closer and closer. Well, she had the baby on October 28th. What do you think they named her?
Carla.
and like I said, only the deal memorandum.
only with this help.
Wow.
So you understand whose you are. That gets you through a lot of things, and it also allows you to just almost be blind when you smell it coming, you learn not to process it.
Yeah.
And say, don't pick it up next. Or right here.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because some of the clients who stereotypically people might have thought would be tough clients because of who I am ended up being, the best.
Yeah.
Just the best.
It's something I talked about, instead of avoiding a person or a situation, that you talked about moving into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard people talk about that with sort of pain or just struggles, and an avoidance strategy often is an unhealthy strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And we think of Jesus and some of the great Old Testament stories where the people went right into the face of evil sometimes to encounter it. Sometimes with tough consequences, but to engage the problem and not to duck it.
Yeah,
Like that.
I'm a firm believer, David, that which you run away from, you will run into. Just backing away from it, you're going to back into it anyway. And the thing is, you really have to understand that sometimes he's taking you through those trials to teach you something. And I'm also a firm believer that if you do not pass the test, you will repeat the class. When he's trying to tell have you ever had an experience where you feel like you're going through something over and over again? You say, I just went through this. How am I going through this again? Well, it took
a bad Groundhog Day.
Yeah, and it took me a while before I finally realized, I didn't pass the test. Yeah. So now when I feel like I'm about to repeat something, I will stop. And I'll say, okay, Lord, what are you trying to teach me here? I don't want to miss it because I don't want to go through this again. I don't want to miss it.
You as you look back over your years, if you're like me, and I'm sure everyone in the room, we wish we could have a couple do-overs, a couple mulligans, where maybe, and not just because we made a bad marketplace decision. That always happens. We don't always win. But now that we make a bad ethics decision, or make a decision that is frankly not in keeping with our faith, that we're a little embarrassed about. You can't win all the fights, but can you look back and think of any where you go, wow, I wish I could have a do-over, that one was not the Carla I should have been?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I would say early in my career is the example, and I know this is a general answer, but I struggled a lot because of the things that I didn't know. A lot of the things that I write about and expect to win, the fact that perception is the co-pilot to reality, being clear on your own agenda, understanding the 90-day rule, a lot of those things. And I also did not know whose I was, and I didn't know how to call on that power for help. And so if there was a do-over, I was always a child of God. I always had that power, but I didn't have the understanding of what that meant and how I could harness that. So there were a lot of days that I worried, a lot of days that I thought were dark, a lot of days that, I was just really freaking out because I couldn't figure out what was going to happen, and is this going to work out, and who should I go talk to, and what should I do? Yeah. And if I knew then what I know now, I would not have stressed and worried about those things as much.
And as you look around, obviously we've got a couple gray hair folks here, top of their game, seniors. We've got rising young professionals. It's a high potential room, a high caliber room. What words of wisdom would you give to the 20 or 30 something year old person, whether they're in Wall Street or something totally different? As you look back, what words would you pass on?
Yeah, I would tell them to harness who you are as a child of God. Understand what that means and what that means to you.
Well, what does that mean? Because you keep saying that. I mean, yes. I have a hunch, but what's that mean to be a child of God?
That means I belong to Him. He is the Father. He is the Master, and I should run my life according to His Word. And that I have the Holy Spirit within me, which means I'm a pretty powerful person.
Wait,
and
Catholics
I need to
talking about
that.
The Holy Spirit? It's getting a
Of
little
course,
friskier now.
Of course, no.
I'm just kidding.
Of course,
yeah.
There's the Trinity. So I first spend some time understanding what that means to you, because as I said, mine was an evolution in terms of understanding what He was trying to tell me, especially as I hit hard times, even though the foundation was there from 3 months old. But that personal relationship is different than the confines of what you choose to call your religion.
Right.
So understand what that means. Also, I would say, again, be the architect of your own agenda. Know why you are doing what you are doing. And, don't worry so much about the person to your left and the person to your right. What works for you in making you your best self? Because you can create an equation that a lot of other people may subscribe to and believe in over time because you choose to prosecute it your way. Right. So that's what I would say to them, and own that. And there's no right way, there's no wrong way. It's your way powered by His guidance, and look for it, seek it.
If I'm reading you the right way, your first point about being a child of God and figuring what it means to be God's person and not ourselves, it reminds me, do you remember in the New Testament there's this rich young ruler who goes to Jesus and says, what do I need to do to inherit eternal life? And he's like anyone in this room. By worldly standards, this room is a very wealthy room, right? And at the end, he says, you know, you keep the commandments, you keep all the commandments. And I said, well, you got to do one more thing. You got to sell everything and give it all away. And of course, then you might remember the end line of the story is, and he went away sad.
Mm-hmm.
So he couldn't do it. And I've always thought one of the challenges in reading the Bible is a teaching a universal teaching, or is it a specific? Is it generalizable or specific to that person?
Mm-hmm.
And I think in that case, it wasn't so much about that we all should give everything away, but that person did because that's what was standing between him and God.
Mm.
He was relying on his wealth, not his love of God and
Mm-hmm.
God's love of him. So I hear you saying you need to figure out what's the story for you, which may be different than
Absolutely.
for me.
Absolutely.
That we're not all cookie cutters, that
Mhm.
God has a particular plan for Carla. And
He
you gotta
made each
figure
of us
out what it
unique.
is.
He made each of us unique.
Yeah.
And he gave each of us a gift or gifts.
Yeah.
And so you need to figure out the way to use yours and to use it in the best way. And I'm a firm believer that if you use it on behalf of other people, you really have an opportunity to manifest blessings. And the more, I sort of believe in he gives, I get, I give. Which means he give, I get, and and that's the way it works. And the more you do it, the bigger the circle gets. And yet I tell you, there's nothing more powerful than thinking about having a multiplier effect and using your time, talent, and your treasure on somebody else's behalf.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's going to be giving some time to someone, maybe a listening ears, maybe volunteering for 3 hours in a week. Sometimes it's going to be you have no time, but you can write that check. That will help an organization that's going to help a lot of people. And sometimes it can be your talent because you say, no, you all should structure this way or do that way. And that changes the organization and enables the organization to be able to help a lot of people. So if you think about the power of helping those that you cannot even see, think about that. You don't know who that person is that you enable to get that scholarship and what great things they might go off to do. So I believe in trying to use all of that as aggressively as you possibly can.
Well, and you make an interesting point that so often we might just have a quiet aside or say something we have no idea how that's touched someone's life. Would you mind sharing the story that about maybe someone in this room, I don't know, but the man from Greenwich who was feeling pretty depressed and blue and the weight of the world on his shoulders and he sent you that email. Would you mind telling that story?
Yes. In 2006, when I did the second Carnegie Hall concert, I just released my second album called Joy is Waiting. And one of the songs that I wrote on that album is called Standing on Holy Ground. And the whole message is no matter where you're standing, if you're at the bus stop, if you're on the train stop, if you're in the grocery store, no matter where you're standing, it's holy ground because he's always with you. So that's holy ground. So the person had come to the concert and wrote me an email the next day and said, I've been feeling pretty rough, been feeling pretty bad about life, and I heard you sing Standing on Holy Ground last night. And as I'm standing on at the Greenwich train stop this morning, I realized that I'm not alone, that I am standing on holy ground at this train station.
No, I just
and that happened to be a senior colleague. Yeah.
I get goosebumps thinking of that. Have you ever thought of, a lot of different people I work with in the marketplace, and particularly senior executives, they've got more money than they need. Life's good in that regard. They could cash out tomorrow and just go fishing the rest of their life or play golf or whatever. Have you ever thought of doing a similar thing, not to go fishing or play golf, but to throw yourself full-time in philanthropic work? Do you ever think about that?
No, I haven't really thought about that as the next path. I will always be involved in philanthropic work. So when you say throw myself, what came to my mind was, did I ever want to run a nonprofit as opposed to, being involved? I will always be involved philanthropically because I believe that it is our responsibility, to help others. Yeah. And so that I don't think that's ever going to go away no matter what. I'm not sure I'd want to run a nonprofit because then I feel like that would constrict me more to just that one nonprofit than my ability to pursue 3 or 4 different lanes. And right now it's education, it's healthcare, it's hunger, it's the arts. So it gives me the ability to pursue my passions along those lines.
Yeah. And do you think the business, and particularly the financial world, but professional services or any kind of work, do you think that could be a ministry, a calling in the true sense of the word? Or do you think, no, that's just a means to an end, we go there, we make money so we can be generous?
No, it absolutely can be a calling. And the reason I'm smiling is because when David and I had our first conversation on the phone, I was sort of really in this period of discernment because I'd given a couple of speeches and I'd had an opportunity to speak at a couple of churches, and people had come up to me and said, you called. You're called. And I was sort of thinking, because again, as I said, I've lived long enough that if he's speaking to me, I don't want to miss it, right? And so I was at the point of saying to people, well, how'd you get called? How'd you know you got called, right? So I was talking to David about his story, and he said, yeah, I felt like I was called to do this. And I said, oh gosh, what did he say? Did you hear it? How did it happen? Because, I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to make sure.
So I showed her the email that I got from him. And I'll show that to everybody.
I'm trying to make sure I don't miss it. And he said something profound, and he said, wait, calm down, before you think, you're being called to the pulpit. You might want to think about sometimes you're called right where you are. To be a minister and to be helpful and to evangelize to someone. And, so he said, I'm not telling you you're not made for it. I'm just telling you don't have to, panic and think he's trying to tell you to do something right now. So, yes, and that really started me thinking about how many people have come up to me. So, and again, people that I don't even know saying, again, thank you so much for, for your faith and expressing your faith. And you don't often see someone in your position that's so open about it. And shortly after you and I had a conversation, and I didn't tell you this, I'm walking through Times Square, going towards 8th Avenue on 46th Street. And I see, this older black gentleman and two older women, I wouldn't say that, they're not that much older than me, but, they're coming and, sort of struggling down the street. And this guy's just looking at me. He was staring at me. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, come on, I don't look that good today. Why are you looking at me? And so I get almost to 8th Avenue, and the guy comes back, and he's sweating, he's running. He says, sister, I know you. I read an article about you in the New York Times last year. I said, yeah, September 19th, yeah. He said, yeah, I told my wife that was you. I told her it was you. And I got your book. You got a book called Expect to Win. I got it so highlighted. And I know something else about you. And I said, what? He said, you're a child of God. And I said, yes, I am. I love it with all my heart. He said, I knew it. Can you write on this so I can show her? I said, no, I'll give you a card. I told my wife, and he just went down the street. And I'm standing there saying, oh my gosh, I'm standing here at 46 and 8, and I just got a chance to witness. Wow. And all I could hear was the scripture that says, if you deny me, I will deny you in front of my Father. And then the next block on my way to the restaurant, I was like, I passed the test. I didn't deny him. Oh yes. It was such a weird, experience.
Yeah. It is something. I was mentioning I do a lot of consulting work in addition to my work down at Princeton, and I was just over in London working with a CEO of a big company as a management team, and afterwards, it's amazing how, like, over the coffee or if it's in the evening over a meal, that sooner there's someone else, they say, I've read your bio, and before you know it, they want to talk about God. Mm-hmm. And it just staggers me without even bringing it up. Mm-hmm. And your bio, not many people from Wall Street have on their bio, my favorite quote is, I'm going to botch up.
We are blessed. We can be a blessing to someone
so we
else.
could be a blessing to someone else. That's in her bio.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that takes some chutzpah to do that. So I think it's terrific. We're going to open up to questions as we often do in a moment. And I've also invited Carla, if she feels inspired, and if her throat, if it's not too painful, we'd love for you to sing a song or two if you want. But I don't want you to feel pressure. And lest I forget, a couple things I want to mention just so I don't forget. All of her CDs are available on Amazon.com, so just Google Carla Harris and music and you'll find it, as is her book, Expect to Win. And also we've got a half a dozen envelopes. If any of you would like to be a patron at whatever level for her upcoming Carnegie Hall, you might be persuaded to support her. And so there are half a dozen envelopes over here in front of my laptop. I invite anyone to please consider taking. Murph, you got a question? Or are you going to sing?
It can be sometimes a real challenge managing up versus managing down.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share any stories, insights about how your faith has influenced decisions managing upward.
You didn't hear in the back, managing up versus managing down is often very different, and how has your faith maybe helped you in any particular stories you can think of managing up?
Mm-hmm. There isn't a conversation or decision that I have of import where I don't consult the Holy Spirit first. So that's where my faith has been helpful in helping me to figure out how to communicate in a way that's going to be the most effective. You know, I tell people there wasn't a deal that I was pricing when I was in capital markets where I didn't go in, especially in the initial public offering and consult, because, you know, that's a point of judgment sometime between 50 cents and $1, maybe even a quarter. And same thing when I'm managing up. Is to go in and be able to communicate in a way that'll be effective. And I pray over every meeting that I have that the good and right outcome would happen. One of my favorite scriptures is Romans 8:28. All things work together for the good of those who love him and who are called to his purpose. And, you know, the thing that I think God has been dealing with me on this year in particular is faith. And I thought that I was a woman of great faith, and I kind of understood this faith thing. And it was so funny, at the beginning of this year, everywhere I turned, I was seeing Hebrews 11:1, out of all kinds of places. And I said, well, what is
Hebrews
this?
11:1 being?
The faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Mm-hmm. And everywhere that I went, and it was some way it kept coming. And I said, well, I need to check myself, because maybe he's trying to tell me something. And I even recorded on my last album a song called Faith that I helped to write. And the words that you'll hear me speaking, not singing on this song.
Just be aware, if there's a cannon shot moment, don't freak out.
Okay.
It happens. It's the Admiral Boom
Thank you,
here.
'cause this would and it was funny because thank the Lord.
I forget half the time.
It was funny because when I went in to record the song, I'd learned the words to sing into because someone else wrote the music, I wrote the lyrics, my producer Sean Lucas said, "No, I don't want you to sing this. I want Carla to preach it this evening." And so I just shared with the Holy Spirit, you know, what came in the recording booth. So when I actually got chance to perform the song, I had to go back and learn what I said, because he recorded it that night and that was it. And in that song, I talked about having trust and knowing that it's going to be good no matter what. And that's what he's drilled through my head this year, that faith is about not being able to see it. You don't know where you're going, and you don't know how it's going to go out, but you must trust that it will turn out exceedingly and abundantly well, because that's what he promised. And that's what I have been dealing with. So in going to those meetings, managing up, you know, I would pray that it'd be a good outcome. But now it's even more powerful when I think about how to manage up, because then the stakes are higher, as you know, as you get more and more senior.
It's interesting to think of, a lot of times, I'm not proud to say this, but I will pray for a specific outcome. Mm-hmm. And fair enough. I mean, the Bible does say, God does say, you know, tell me I know your wishes, but tell me anyway. So it's, on the one hand, it's perfectly fine to pray for something with specificity. But I just love that prayer that the right outcome happen. Mm-hmm. And it may not be the one in the short term we want in a business deal. Instead of, I pray this deal closes, but I pray the right thing happens for me, the business, the client, or maybe mentioning us last. That's a powerful and different way to think of it. Other questions, thought? Let's have Idea go first.
I'm just wondering how that applies to your own aspirations in terms of the pursuit of specificity. Did you always have your eye on the prize at the top, or have you just always done the best job you can do with the thing you're doing at the moment and have been surprised by your own success?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's been the latter in terms of just doing a great job no matter what I'm doing. Because I will tell you that where I'm sitting today, there are things that have happened in my life that I did not see when I walked out of Harvard Business School 25 years ago. I had no aspirations to write a book. I wouldn't have told you that I would have recorded. I probably would have said I would have done something in music, but I wouldn't have told you I did 3 sold-out concerts at Carnegie Hall. I wouldn't have told you that I did 3 CDs, because I didn't even see what these things looked like back then. And a lot of the accolades that you heard David talked about, again, some of those things I didn't even have in my vision. I didn't know that they were there. Now, I did know and expected that I would be successful no matter what I did. I certainly had that expectation because that's who my parents brought up, to always excel, do the best that you can, because being the best always creates choices and options for you, right? So that was how I grew up. But in terms of, knowing that distinctly that I would be a managing director, I hadn't made that decision when I walked in, in August of 1987. I had made the decision to get to the first promotion level. And then after I got to the first promotion level, then, I continued to calibrate my desires from there. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier in your career, if you had a do-over, that you used to worry and stew and fret about deals and so forth a lot more. And you say now I'm assuming you don't do that anymore. Is that strictly a faith thing, or turning it over to God, or how?
Yeah.
What is the difference?
Yeah, and let me be clear. It wasn't so much fretting over the deals. It was fretting over how I was doing at that point, because things weren't going as well as I thought they should be going, given the fact that I worked hard, I was very smart. What was happening here? Why wasn't I being as successful right now as I had been, all of my life? So it was more fretting about my person, my standing, and where I was, than it was fretting over a particular deal. It's funny. It's always easier to turn the deals over to him, but in terms of worrying about your person, that's where your humanity, gets in the way. And that's what I have learned and matured over time to move that out of the way. And this year was the ultimate. In terms of understanding that lesson on faith and not being able to see and let him manifest the next thing. Mm-hmm.
So when you go into work each day, you just turn it over to God and
Yeah.
let him say, God, you're in control, make it happen.
Yeah.
Let me do it, make it go.
No, I don't.
You want her on your team, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, I will tell you, of course, as a human, you know what you're trying to accomplish, but where it's different is trusting that it will come out well and it will be done well, as long as I do my best. Because he gives us power and strength and intellect, right? It's all power through him, but he gives us abilities. Now, I'm a firm believer that you have to do your part, and it's when you have done everything that you can that you have to, step aside and let him do the rest and understand and not get in the way with your humanness and try to push and shove and make it happen. That's when the red light should go on and say, whoa, wait a minute. Okay, have I done everything humanly possible? Have I applied all of my intellect, everything? Have I given my best? And if you've given your best, move out of the way. He'll do the rest.
God helps those that help themselves.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It is a strange part to me. It's sort of almost the paradox of Christianity. On the one hand, there's teachings in the New Testament of without me, essentially, you're nothing. All good things come through me, me being God. And then on the other hand, there's the parable of the talents and other teachings where we're meant to pull for socks, and we're meant to engage and work hard. It's not sort of die by miracle. Sort of.
And
There's that interesting tension, isn't there?
Right, even in the miracles. Daughter, by your faith, you have been saved. The woman who went through all of those people who had the issue of blood, who said, if I can just touch the hem of his garment. But she had to fight through all those people. Let's talk about Nicodemus. There was effort exerted, your power. Use what you have, and he's got the rest.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. That's terrific. Other questions? Patrick, did you want in? And then we'll come over to...
First of all, a quick comment. There's this continuing assumption based because the media actually focuses on the screw-ups on Wall Street, but I've known the financial markets both in New York and over here for over 35 years. My word is my bond. It runs it in London. It is over here. You use the word a lot, trust. And I think anybody in the street knows that that's what really does drive the street. And Christianity is not against that. Christianity is the firm foundation behind it. Mm-hmm. So I've always found that when you reveal it, frankly, people understand that there's a trust that is inherent in your faith, which they gravitate to. And just curious whether you found that too when you kind of revealed yourself.
Oh, absolutely. I used to be on the syndicate desk, and that's where I spent most of my career. Loved that job.
You're rare.
Yeah, no, I absolutely loved it because it gave me an opportunity to see a lot of different management teams, a number of different companies in a wide variety of industries. And despite the fact that, I've done a number of IPOs, a number of common stock transactions, no deal was like the last deal because that management team was different, that company was different, and that day in the market was different. And I'll tell you that one of the things that I think made me effective in that is that, I only had 2 weeks to really build that trust. Because my colleagues, would pitch the business, they had the relationship, and now you're with the syndicate person who's going to tell you how that deal is going to get done, how it's going to be priced, what's going to happen. And I think one of the reasons that I was really effective in that role is that I would look at a client, and say, I'm going to give it to you straight, no chaser. And this is what's going to happen on this IPO. And when I say this is what I'm trying to tell you. And when I say that, that's what's happening. And if I don't tell you that we haven't lost anybody by the time we get halfway through, then we're going to have a successful end. That's how it's going. But if we start hearing a bunch of early no's, then we're going to be in trouble at the end. And we're going to have to make some choices about size or price. So they started to trust me throughout. So when we got to that tough conversation, if we had to postpone or we had to downsize or we had to price below the range, I had very few difficult conversations because I had communicated to them that if we don't have a deal at the end of this 2 weeks, there was no deal to be had. Morgan Stanley couldn't find a deal. There was no deal. It wasn't about Morgan Stanley couldn't find it. Nobody could have found this deal because we're going to give you our absolute best. We're going to make it happen. And so I think that was one and they knew, again, sometimes the messenger matters, right? Sometimes the messenger matters. And so I think that the fact that they knew that I was bringing authentically who I was and that I was going to do everything possible and bring all the firm's resources to bear for their particular deal, I think that was what gave me the ability to deliver bad news well. Because I had a reputation of being someone who could deliver bad news well, meaning not have the client go ballistic if you say that you couldn't get it done.
Yeah, terrific. Yeah, which brings us back to the conversation about authentic leadership, that you were being truthful throughout the process so that when bad news came, they know that you were still on their side and it's not something you've been hiding or about
No.
for weeks. So, Karen.
You made a brief reference to your parents and growing up with the expectation that you would excel. I do a lot of work with young people and families, and I'd love to hear more about your parents and how you were raised.
Yes,
Good questions. Tell us a bit about your parents and how you were raised.
Yes, my mother was an educator. She started off as a physical education teacher and ended her career as an assistant principal at a middle school. And my father was a captain of a commercial fishing vessel. And they basically had a no excuses, no nonsense household.
Are you surprised?
And, they just never would allow me to use excuses. And, I remember telling my dad, because, I'm looking around in class and, the report cards came out and I'd get A's and my classmates would come back and say, oh, I got a quarter for every A I got, or I got $1 for every A I got. So next time I went home and I said, yo, Daddy, where's my money? I got all these A's. And he said, you better get those A's. You don't get no money for those A's. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen if you don't get those A's. So I was like, oh, and then my mother would always tell me, strive to be your best and to be better than. And it's funny, she never would allow me to use, the excuse of being black as reason why I wasn't attaining or prejudice that was out there in the world. And she would always say, listen, world's not fair. But if you want that A, get that A+. So if you get shaved, you still have your A. And that was the way she kind of messaged it before, I really understood what it was she was trying to say. So I'm one that I don't look for excuses. I go here first. Understanding that there are exogenous factors that could get in your way, I get it. But I go here first. If something doesn't go well, I say, what didn't I do right? What part did I play in this outcome? And after I have fully examine that, then I'll start to take a look at whatever other things might have been out there, and if there's something that that I can do with that. And some things, and again, that's when going back to you can't do anything about it. That's when you say, okay, he's got that.
I see now the connection, perhaps, was you talked a bit about your parents and why the two of the charities, and I support many others, but the two educational ones for young kids, why that, particularly one of them, I think is a disadvantage to kids, that's where your heart is and where your mind belongs.
And growing up African American, especially in the 60s and 70s, the mantra in African American families, in African American families, I'd say across this country, was education. Education is the way to make things better, and that is something that no one can ever take away from you. So it was sort of drilled in you to get that and to do that and to do that well.
Yeah. That's terrific. Now, I don't want to put pressure on you, but are you up for singing a little bit?
I do a little bit.
All right, thank you. So we've saved enough time for that. For newcomers, maybe I didn't mention we have a hard stop at 1:15. We've got about 5 minutes, and Pick whatever you'd like. Yeah.
Okay.
What's going?
I'll do
through
my
your-
mother's favorite song.
Oh, that's a good idea. What's that?
Because He Lives. I'll do one verse and chorus.
You just
Okay.
go where you want. So how about we'll start with round one.
God sent His Son. They excuse me. They called Him Jesus. He came to love, heal, and forgive. He bled and died to bear my pardon. An empty grave is there to prove my Savior lives. Because He lives, I can face tomorrow. Because He lives, all fear is gone. Because I know He holds the future. My life is worth the living just because He lives.
That is a first. We have never had an executive interviewee sing before.
That was the first. I've never caught myself in a note in the middle
Well,
of
and I was thinking if before 8 in the morning or whatever to hit that note, you're pretty amazing. You know, I sing in the men's choir at our church. I could have backed you up, but I didn't want to bring down the averages here. You know, often at the end of a session, I'll send everyone out with a blessing. But in a way, I feel I don't need to do that today. That your mission statement, that as God has blessed you, through you, others might be blessed. You've blessed us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you very
That was
much.
good.